of 2000, a yellow journalist by the name of Chris Smith at Salt Lake Tribune. His skin's not yellow, it's just what he does. Published a 3-part series, which he announced rather bald-faced, knew better, that the bones were full of secrets that would have been revealed if the archaeologists had been allowed more time with them, and that the Mormon Church conspired with the governor, who was a descendant of one of the killers, although the governor's ancestor claims that he was just a picket rider. Most of the people who were there were just there. They picket riders, they didn't do anything. But the bones were then, under this conspiracy, quickly replanted. The Associated Press, every other wire service in the world picked that up. And here's the message that went out to the world, and which is now in all these books, Krakauer's book, Denton's book, etc. The bones came out of the ground. They were revealing nasty truth that Mormon Church didn't want out there, and so the Mormon Church conspired to get them buried quickly so those truths could not be revealed. That bit of misinformation has been enormously damaging. It is one of those myths that all of you who understand history know how these things happen. It shows up in one book, and pretty soon a graduate student puts it in his dissertation, and pretty soon it's in 10 other books, and pretty soon it's the truth. So the truth is, my friends, that we had 29 partial remains that were going to tell us the Mormons, not Indians, killed these people, and because the Mormon Church didn't want that information out, it conspired to get those bones buried quickly in order to hide the truth. That is the truth now. And if you want to stand up in front of a crowd, like I've done over and over again, and try to persuade folks that isn't the truth, you're wasting your time. But let me tell you in just a couple of sentences how you don't have to take my word that it's not the truth. In 1859, in May of that year, Major Carleton came up out of California with a bunch of guys. They met some other guys from Camp Floyd who were already there. And Carleton surveyed the remains that were strewn all over the meadows by wolves and, I guess we're UVSC, wolverines or whatever they are. Badgers, I can't tell by looking at the statues. Looks kind of like an ugly cougar to me, which makes sense. Anyway, Major Carleton said this, quote, it's on our website, it's everywhere. It's been public record for 144 years. Nearly every skull I saw had been shot through with pistol and rifle shot. So what truth were there in the bones? Well, were they smokers? Were they malnourished? What did they eat? It didn't tell us who killed them any better than we already knew. Who killed them? Who had guns in Iron County in 1857? Who? The Mormons. Did it tell you how? Did Carleton's sentence tell how they were killed? Yeah, they were coup de grace. They were shot in the head. So the idea that there was a new truth here that the church had to be afraid of is just hogwash. And secondly, it is also hogwash. In 10 minutes on the phone you can demonstrate this. J.K. Fancher is not a Mormon. He's a distinguished citizen of Harrison. He has no sympathy for the Mormon Church. He's a lateral descendant of Alexander Fancher. He'll tell you, I called Dixie and said, you better get your son to bury those bones or there's going to be hell to pay. That's how it happened. And Mike Levitt called the state archaeologist and said, turn them over to those people so they can bury them, or there's going to be trouble. But the truth is not the truth anymore, because Chris Smith said otherwise and so forth. Let me get to the last incident, and I am going on way too long. I was not in favor of the Olympics. You say, so what? Well, so what is that as soon as I I saw, look, everybody celebrating about the Olympics. And as soon as I heard from my president at the university that we would be dismissing classes so they could use the ice sheet there for something called curling, my wife and I began to save our money on our Sky Miles and planned a trip to Maui for 22 days. Figuring that, hey, it's the last chance I'll ever have to go to Maui in February in my racket. Unless I take a sabbatical, and even then I probably won't be able to. So we were in Maui, and the second day before we came home, the Olympics were over. We were coming home on Tuesday, it was Monday. I think the closing ceremonies were on Sunday. I'm sitting on the beach, and this very piece of whatever it is rings. Don't ever get one of these, they're like cigarettes. It rings, and it's John Hollenhorst from Channel 5, and he says, hey, what do you think of this lead sheet? They found down at Lee's Ferry. And I said, what lead sheet? He says, where you been, man? I says, in Maui. I'm still in Maui. Well, you're all familiar with the lead sheet, and my friend Steve Mayfield here and I have had a lot of conversation. I don't know whether you'll be able to see this. I'm not very good. How do we turn this on? There we go. You've probably seen this, and some of you may not be able to see this real well, but here's a pretty poor rendition of what this...
Stand in front of it.
Okay. I've got big classes, I'm used to yelling. But anyway, here's what the thing looks like. And a Park Service worker at Lee's Ferry, before the Olympics, found this thing in a building, an old fort there. Steve tells me they're pretty sure it was put where they found it in about 1998 or 99, something like that, right, Steve? It's an old piece of lead. Recent metallurgical studies have shown that it was mined in the Ozark Plateau in southern Missouri, not far from the homeland of the massacred people, before 1865. The script on it, in case you haven't seen it, and this is my own attempt to try to copy it. Steve's done better work than his friends, George Throckmorton and others, says that basically Lee's at the Pareja River. It's January of 1872. He's sick, he's tired, he knows he's going to be taken pretty soon, but he doesn't really care. He'll take the blame. He doesn't fear death. Brigham Young, through George A. Smith, ordered this done. Okay? Well, of course, this created an enormous media frenzy. Smoking gun, boy, this is it, now we know for sure, Lee admits it. So on. Well, somebody right away, one of my friends, wrote and said, well, didn't Lee say that in the Confessions of John D. Lee, Mormonism Unveiled? And the answer is yes, but nobody paid any attention because everybody knew his lawyer wrote that book. How many lawyers are here? We won't go further with that. But we will say this. I think you know that Lee's lawyer was working pro bono almost. The second trial, his deal with Lee was, I'll defend you, but I get your book and the rights to your book. And then he had the book for several months after Lee's death, and no one doubts that he manufactured much of what's in the latter part of it because it's so inconsistent with the rest of Lee's work. Anyway, long story made short, I jumped in really quickly and said it's a hoax. And my reasons were, I'm about handwriting analysis, my reasons were that the message is inconsistent with Lee's diary at the same time. He was at the Pareja, but he was not saying stuff like this. In fact, the day after this was supposed to be written, Lee went on a 5-day horsepacking trip with one of his sons looking for the location for a new ranch and was really looking forward. He just finished 2 houses. He put a slave fort in one of them, and he had everything going for him at that moment. He really thought he was out of the woods, and he was okay. And if you read the rest of his diary on 6 months on either side, he's very defensive about Mountain Meadows. If anybody suggests Brigham Young does it, he calls him a damn liar. I could tell you some specific incidents, but I read very carefully the whole journal on 6 months on either side. When I finally got home, I told Hollenhorst from Maui that I thought it was a hoax. And he read it to me over the phone. I said, that's not Lee, it just isn't Lee. Well, later on, the spellings are another issue. Later on, Steve and his friends in the criminal justice criminology racket did handwriting analysis and so on and found it entirely inconsistent with Lee. Not only when he wrote on paper, but when he writes Steve scratched into rocks and things like that. It's just completely different. He used ampersands instead of the word and. He didn't use the dashes. This hoaxer tried to imitate his double line of capital letters. didn't notice that Lee only did it on the vertical instead of and did not do it on the horizontal. So it's a clumsy hoax. Well, I bring this to your attention because to this day, more than a year later, people like Sally